introducing our next speaker, Catherine Collins.
Hello, friends. I am here with you tonight to share the gift that my father gave to me when I started my first real job. Some of you might recognize this. It's a sign from IBM, sometime in the 1970s. My dad worked there for many years, and that meant that for all those years, our entire family was surrounded by this motto. Every pencil, every coffee mug, every notebook held this simple imperative: think. And this sign, it's come with me everywhere, from my very first cubicle overlooking the scenic elevator shaft to big corner offices, Boston, London, back home again. And it's only now that I realize what a tremendous gift this really was. This idea that was rooted from my earliest memories, that when you go to work, your job is to think. I've been an investor now for over 20 years, and one thing I love about my profession is that it demands that you think with your full, creative, curious mind every single day. And one reason it demands that is because things are always changing. Things are changing, obviously, within the investment profession as well, and over that 20 years, it's hard to overstate how much change there's been. New tools, new processes, new products, new mechanics, and they've all brought with them some really great advantages. And they've all had some interesting ripple effects as well. I'm going to walk you through just one tool and show you the scale of the change that we've seen in this time. This is a heat map. Some of you might find it familiar from CNBC. It's a really handy graphic and a pretty simple one. Green is good, red is bad. It shows you the whole stock market at one fell swoop. You can see all the stocks, decide where to focus your attention. So it seems like a pretty handy tool. It's even more handy when you realize what it replaced. This is the Quotron machine, and it was about as user-friendly as it looks in this picture. It was gigantic, it cost an arm and a leg, it required a dedicated phone line, and in my case, you had to share. So it was down the hall, around the filing cabinets, you had to stand in line, type in each ticker, and if it was a busy day in the stock market, its tiny little green screen would actually quiver as it gave you the information with the sheer physical effort of bringing the data to you. So obviously, this heat map that we use now is a much, much better tool for getting data. But when we switched from this Quotron, we lost something at the same time. This Quotron, awful as it was, this was our water cooler. This is where, if you were the oil analyst, you learned what was happening with housing prices. If you were the housing analyst, you learned what was happening with semiconductor stocks. It took all of our tiny little pods of knowledge and it tied them together into something greater, into something with insight and even occasionally wisdom. And most importantly, it tied us to one another, to our colleagues. So I've got these handy heat maps now. They can fit right in my pocket. There's 6 apps on my phone alone that will bring them to me at any moment of the day. But my colleagues and their wisdom and their insight and our connection to one another, they're still out there, farther away. So you can see the effect that changes like this would have in an industry. Tool after tool, product after product, process after process. They've brought with them this tremendous advantage in efficiency and scale and ease of use. But in many cases, they've served to chip away at the connection that has always been so vital in my profession. Connection to each other and connection to the world around us. So as these changes were happening, you know, they were echoed in my own career. And we entered a dark period. I couldn't quite place my finger on it, but over time I was feeling more and more distanced from my own profession, more and more ill at ease in my own work. I remember one series of meetings we had in London, and I met 12 or 13 clients in one day, all in a row. And we got to the end of the day and I realized every single client had asked me about tracking error and a bunch of other important statistics related to my portfolios. but only one client had asked me about an actual investment that I'd made, why it was that I thought this company was worthy of that investment, what they were doing that was of value in the world. And around the same time, we had a tiny blip in the stock market, nothing at all like what we were to see a few years later. But my funds were a disaster. They were down 10 times more than any of our fancy, helpful risk assessment algorithms told me was humanly possible. This is not the way you want to stand out in an investment organization. And so I'm thinking to myself, not only do I feel this strange sense of disconnection with this profession I have loved so much, but apparently I'm not even very good at it anymore either. Like I said, it was a dark time. So, luckily, at this time, I found the honeybee. More precisely, I found Dr. Tom Seeley, who's a honeybee researcher at Cornell University. And he was presenting this amazing work he's done on how bees make collective decisions within beehives. So bees, they don't just make good collective decisions, they make fantastic collective decisions. If you give them a choice of where to locate their next beehive, they pick the single best location almost every single time. It's extraordinary. So Dr. Seeley's work, it's fantastic from a scientific perspective, but what really struck me was the end of his talk when he was discussing the conditions that make this amazing decision-making possible. The first condition is that when the bees have a really important decision to make, they leave the hive. They go out into the world and survey the landscape around them. They don't call a big honeybee conference and all go into the conference room with their PowerPoint slides and their flip charts. They go out and engage in the world around them, see what's there, see how they can connect to it and find the best solution. And then when they get that information, they come back together and they share it. They share it openly and democratically and with no spin. There are no bee pundits, there are no bee talking heads, there's no bee NBC blaring in the background all day long telling you what to do. They just share the facts. And when the facts conflict with each other, they go back and they do it all over again until they have complete information. And then most importantly, what enables the great decision making is that the bees have this clear, common, shared value system. They know what makes for a great home, and that is the criteria they use for making their decision. So as Dr. Seeley talked, I felt this huge wave of excitement and calmness all at once. It was a calmness I had not felt for a really long time. And it's because I realized this struggle I had been sensing in my life, this fear that I would have to split from my profession. And this was a terrible fear. You know, I wasn't worried about changing my job. I was worried that my vocation had something wrong at the core of it and that we were no longer compatible. It was a heartbreaking thought. What his work showed me is that investors, they do exactly what these bees do. So a great investor goes out into the world. They don't stand there in front of that heat map and just watch red turn to green all day long. Well, in fact, a lot of them do, but that doesn't make them good investors. The good ideas come when you're out engaged in the world, seeing what's needed, seeing how you can be helpful. And then a really great investor wants to come back and share that information with others, especially with others who might have different points of view. And a great investor, whether they realize it or not, always has a really clear underlying value system guiding their decisions. They know what they're aiming for, and when they see it, they act accordingly. So we get to the end of this honeybee talk, and I realize, wow, my profession, it's okay. My profession is not only okay, it's actually completely aligned with these forces that rule the entire natural world. My disease was not with my profession, not with my vocation. It was with all this stuff we created around it, all of these tools and processes and procedures that were helpful in their own specific ways, but had pulled me off-center, away from this real essence of my profession. So I decided I needed to be more like a honeybee. I left the hive, resigned from the firm that I loved, where I had thrived for almost 20 years. I went out into the world as a volunteer and a pilgrim, re-engaging with my own environment and gathering information. I went to divinity school and earned a degree in moral philosophy to make sure that my own value system was as strong and clear as I wanted it to be. And I started Honeybee Capital, where we have a simple premise that more open-ended inquiry, more engagement with the world ultimately leads to best decisions. So my goal in life now is to show the world that my investment profession is a true and noble calling, one that can actually be of use and benefit to the world. Now, I know that might sound okay in theory, but my brother is an economist, and he is always reminding me we do not live in theory. We live in the actual world. I am thrilled to tell you that in our actual world, this is working really, really well. So I'm going to tell you just about one stock that I've invested in the past couple years that follows these principles. The stock is Lululemon. Might be familiar to some folks in this audience. And I bought it first at the end of 2008. The entire stock market was crushed, and based on any traditional analysis, this looked like a really interesting company. Good franchise, loyal customers, nice valuation, etc. So I thought, okay, I'll buy some, and then as soon as it recovers, I'll probably move on to other ideas. But then I started talking to customers, and I would ask woman after woman about her cute yoga top. And a funny thing happened. Almost every single woman answered me by telling me about her yoga practice and how this practice was so important to her. She'd get stars in her eyes, her whole face would transform. She would tell me how yoga was the most important hour of her day. It was the hour that enabled all the other hours to be as wonderful and productive as they were. And I don't know about you, but I have spent a lot of time on treadmills in my life, and not once have I spoken of my treadmill practice with this dreamy look in my eyes. So these conversations, they really stood out. And yet, if I had had them at any other point in my career, I would have said, oh, well, that's neat. So about your top, tell me about Lululemon. And instead, with this altered mindset, I just tried to listen. And I realized that what these customers were telling me was, it wasn't about their cute yoga top. It was about something much more important and deep and essential in their lives. So I thought, maybe I'll hold on to this stock. And I waited, and I held it longer, and a little longer, and a little longer. And this stock now is up 3,000% since the end of 2008. 30-fold. Now, even if you don't follow stocks, you surely realize this is like a unicorn in stock market terms. It's like something that used to happen many, many years ago, but no one's seen it in so long, they actually don't think it exists anymore. So it's nearly miraculous. And this is something that I never would have seen on my fancy spreadsheets. So you might be thinking to yourself, okay, that sounds fine, but I really don't want to quit my job and go to divinity school and buy yoga stocks. That's totally fine. But I do have a couple quick suggestions if you find yourself in the position that I did, where you and your profession and your vocation are a little bit out of sync. The first suggestion I have is to step away from the screen. Whatever your screen is showing you, whether it's full of stock tickers or emails or a schedule that seems booked from now till the end of time, just step away. Try to go to dinner with someone you love and don't look at your phone, not even when they get up to go to the restroom. Use this chance to reconnect with the world around you and to re-engage with people you love. The second suggestion I have is to try to translate your work into another group's language. If you are working in a really technical environment or a very quantitative one, try to explain what you do in words, or even poetry or music. See if you can do it. See what it looks like in that language. And vice versa, if you're working in a really creative field, see if you can explain it to your accountant cousin in his language. See what that looks like. See what it feels like. Put yourself in this larger context with the world. And the third piece of advice I have, if you are trying to re-center on your own vocation, if you are trying to re-engage and reconnect with that broader world around you and your work, as you're standing there on the edge of the hive, ready to fly out into the world, just pause for a minute, rest your wings, take a really deep breath, and think. Thank you.